I'm Umbreon Libris. For something that may well be the single most important piece of marketing for a game, the covers of the main series Pokemon games are painfully bad. It's actually kind of surprising how well the games do, considering how bland the covers are. Really goes to show that it's not marketing selling these games, it's just the raw power of the brand. So I want to talk about what makes the worst covers so bad, and what's the saving grace on the ones that are actually pretty good. But first, I wanted to quickly look at the covers of some other games to see what they're trying to do and what they're doing well. These aren't supposed to be the best game covers or anything like that. These are just some games that came to mind last night when I was writing this. Breath of the Wild. The Zelda brand is nice and obvious. Link is recognizably Link. He's literally front and center, so clearly he's important, but the high contrast between Link and the sky draws your eyes to look past him and to the vast landscape beyond. Link is almost anonymous here. The game isn't about his character nearly as much as it is about exploring that expanse. The golden ratio is an important principle in art and design. It's a mathematical ratio, about 1 to 1.62, that describes proportions that are very commonly found in nature and that we as humans tend to find pleasing. So if you use this ratio in your compositions, you tend to get very good results. I use it all the time in the books that I design. If you've heard of the rule of thirds, this is very similar, but a little bit more weighted towards the middle of the image. If we take this Breath of the Wild cover and split it according to the golden ratio, we see the title occupies the bottom portion and the horizon falls right on the top split. No wonder it looks so good. Next up, Mario Odyssey. This one's a lot busier, but the emphasis is clearly on Mario himself, the main character, and Cappy, the main feature of the game. The background of snapshots of Mario around the world also tells you that this game involves traveling a lot and that it has a lot of variety. Sonic the Hedgehog, the original game for the Genesis. Not much here, but this game is introducing a new character that Sega is basically banking everything on to beat Mario. So it makes sense that Sonic himself is pretty much the only thing on the cover. But the background does give you some idea of what the game and levels are like. At the very least, there's a loop-de-loop. The Last of Us Remaster. A very simple and somber cover. Doesn't give you too much information about what the game's really like, aside from the guns, but you can tell that it's about these two characters and their relationship, with Joel in particular being the main character. The golden ratio even shows us just how central he is, and compositionally how Ellie and the title balance each other out. These are all very good covers, and even some Pokemon spin-off titles have really good covers. Pokemon Ranger Guardian Signs very clearly puts the emphasis on Raikou and on a Pichu that's holding a ukulele for some reason. I don't know why that is, I know almost nothing about this game, but I know that they are important. And even if I didn't know these were a bunch of legendary Pokemon, I can tell this game is trying to sell me on action and adventure, and Ukulele Pichu. Super Mystery Dungeon doesn't tell me very much either. It's another game I haven't played, but I can tell this Mega Charizard is important, and judging by the huge number of Pokemon packed into the cover, I can tell that this game has a large cast of characters, which suggests a lot of possibility, like I want to meet everyone here. Honestly, even this cover for Pokemon Card GB2, the Japan-only sequel to the Pokemon trading card game Game Boy game, is more exciting than most of the main series covers. It tells you absolutely nothing about the game, unless you're already familiar with the TCG, which, to be fair, is the target audience for the game. But this cover has a lot of movement, and the X of lightning centers your eye on this face? Or mask? Again, I don't know what it is, but I know that it's important. Maybe it's the main villain. Unlike most of those covers, the covers of main series Pokemon games have almost nothing to offer you in terms of what the content of the game is or what the mood of the game is. You have a fantasy creature highlighted on the cover, and that's literally it. But okay, it makes sense that you would want to highlight one of the more important creatures that you get to encounter and collect within the game. It's workable, or so you'd think, except many of the main series covers aren't even that well composed. We'll work from the bottom to the top, more or less in order, so we'll start with Diamond and Pearl. I think these are the absolute worst Pokemon game covers. We've got the Pokemon and the title fitting awkwardly around each other in a way that both end up shafted to the side, with the title tucked into a corner and the Pokemon's face nearly at the edge of the cover. The Pokemon poses aren't anything interesting, and the background is just abstract. The beam of light, the only thing that provides some focus and direction to the eye, makes us look at Dialga's trunk and Palkia's shoulder, which I guess is where their gems are, but is the Pearl really the best thing for me to focus on when the title of the game is Pearl? It's kind of redundant. Platinum is a bit better, with Giratina in a pose that is coming towards the viewer and the zoom lines providing some drama as well, except that they focus behind Giratina at a spot where there isn't really anything. And so ultimately it draws your eye away from Giratina's head and away from the title. Ruby and Sapphire are in a similar boat, with very static poses on the Pokemon and a title that is just centered. I appreciate how the Pokemon go over the Game Boy Advance logo, but that's all they've got. Rayquaza's pose in Emerald is more interesting, but that's about it. Similarly, the only good thing about the covers for Black and White are their strong contrast, which reflects the binary nature of the discussion those games highlight, but that metaphor only becomes evident after you've played the game, and so its power is diminished even though it helps the composition. From there, the improvements are pretty incremental. Fire Red and Leaf Green show more active poses on the Pokemon, which helps. Same with Gold, Silver, and Crystal, although the pose they chose for Ho-Oh works very poorly here, since the two focal points of the cover, Ho-Oh's face and the Pokemon logo, are pulling away from each other. Ho-Oh's face almost ends up in a corner, like Dialga or Palkia, and even gets obstructed by a bit of the GS logo. This is mitigated somewhat in the Japanese versions of these covers. The advantage here, besides not having to use the Western Pokemon logo, which is very ugly, is that the covers actually have different proportions. Whereas in the West, every game box from Game Boy all the way up to the 3DS was more or less square, the Japanese covers for Game Boy family systems were rectangular. The proportions don't quite match the golden ratio, but they get much closer, and so do the compositions. You can see the mascots look a lot more comfortable in the Japanese versions than they do in the Western versions. I think the proportions are also what helps the covers of the two sets of Switch titles. The art of Pikachu and Eevee in Let's Go is very charming. They show up very large, so you know they are what you buy the game for, and their eye level matches the golden ratio. Even the logo is placed comfortably in the bottom portion. What ruins these covers is the background. Not only does it not give any information about the game, it is rendered in a weirdly realistic manner for a game that is strongly cartoony, and Pikachu and Eevee are just pasted on top, not actually standing on anything. Same with Sword and Shield. We've got big, striking mascots, and the placement of elements is pretty good. Shield is better because Zamazenta has a more active pose than Zacian, and because the logo gets to be properly centered. The Sword logo is awkwardly and not deliberately off-center, probably so that it wouldn't get obstructed by the ESRB stamp. But again, the background is plain and abstract, adding a tiny bit of movement to the cover and nothing else. There are many covers that have a decent base, but there are flaws that prevent them from being their best. The covers of Red, Blue, and Yellow focus wonderfully on the Pokemon, and I love the Pikachu art on the cover of Yellow, but again, the background is wasted. Heart Gold and Soul Silver have great Pokemon art, and the background even does show off some of the region, but the compositions don't provide enough focus. Same with Black 2 and White 2, where the background draws your eye towards their tails. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire put too much emphasis on the enormous hands of Groudon and Kyogre. The covers of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon work very well as a pair, with the glare of Ultra Necrozma in the middle, but as separate covers, your eye just seems to be drawn to the very edge of the cover, away from the primary elements. The Japanese covers for Red and Green work really well because everything they do brings your focus to the two Pokemon. And of course, with the first releases of the series, there was nothing else to sell with. The Pokemon are centered horizontally in line with the vertical zigzag, giving the composition a strong vertical axis. But vertically, they are above center, with their main features right at the golden ratio height and their base just behind the series title, which, along with the circular background, ensure your eyes look at nothing else. All this stuff at the edges, you have to work to pay attention to. You get the same thing with the Japanese covers of Ruby and Sapphire and Fire Red and Leaf Green, except here the primary focus is horizontal, owing to the landscape format of the box. The way the Pokemon overlap the top and bottom bars, and especially how Venusaur and Charizard seem to be moving forward out of the box, really helps to sell the action. Now we're getting into the cream of the crop. Although Sun is another boring, static cover without much dynamism to it, Moon works much better. Even though Lunala isn't doing anything active, the way that it bleeds off of the page really gives a sense of its size, which Solgaleo doesn't get. Plus, even though both of their faces are on the same focal point of the image, Lunala is given much more space to gaze at than Solgaleo, making Lunala look contemplative while Solgaleo just faces the wall. Moon is definitely one of the best covers in the square format, along with X. While on Y, the background of clouds doesn't seem to fit with Yveltal's evil and death theme, on X, the foliage and the light filtering through the canopy really give that feeling of peace and life that Xerneas is known for. Whereas on Y, the fork of the Y places the focus of the composition on Yveltal's very important foot, on X, it draws you right to Xerneas' face, and it matches the flow of Xerneas' own body shape wonderfully. For a game that boasts the theme of beauty, the cover of X is especially fitting. But like I said before, the rectangular format allows for much better compositions, and so the absolute best covers, in my opinion, are Japanese. The covers for the Japanese versions of Blue and Yellow have everything the covers of Red and Green had, but with one relatively minor adjustment that makes a big difference. Even though they still have that vertical line that centers the eye, the Pokemon art itself is not centered. That slight imbalance makes the cover less static and more interesting. Not only that, but both Blastoise and even more so Pikachu have their faces at a focal point that matches the golden ratio, both horizontally and vertically. It's perfect. But what I think is the absolute best cover of all main series Pokemon games so far is the Japanese cover of Pokemon Emerald. Again, it has all the good stuff that Japanese Ruby and Sapphire also had, but the way Rayquaza is posed, and more importantly, the way it is placed, is a huge improvement. Like Lunala, it bleeds off the image, so it looks huge. It's coming towards the viewer with its gaping maw, so it looks menacing and powerful. Compositionally, the ray bursts of the background draw your eye towards the title, but the big element that no matter what you will always look at first is Rayquaza's face, which, just like Pikachu and Blastoise, sits at a perfect golden ratio focal point. If every main series cover was about as good as Moon or X or the Japanese versions of Blue or Yellow or Emerald, we'd be in really good shape. But that's not the case, and I think that there's two overarching issues. The first is that the backgrounds have very little function. Almost all of them are abstract, and so they only serve to guide the eye of the viewer or to add a little bit of movement and dynamism to the image. They have a function in the composition of the cover, but they don't give any information about the games themselves. If we think back to Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey, what was around the main character was just as important as the character, if not more important. In a series that focuses pretty heavily on collecting literally hundreds of creatures, it's pretty weird that the cover only highlights one. But what I think is the bigger problem is that the Pokemon art on the covers is not usually drawn to be cover art. Or at least it doesn't look that way. I know absolutely nothing about how the cover art was really made. I don't know if anyone outside of the Pokemon Company knows this, but what I can tell you is that this doesn't look like, let's draw Kyogre in a really cool pose for the cover. Almost all of the covers look to me like they were built from existing assets. So the official art of Solgaleo already looked like this, and that's what the cover designer got, that's what they had to work with, and this is the best that they could come up with. Trust me, I absolutely get the struggle.
You really really does.
But it's not the ideal approach from the point of view of a cover designer. Especially for a game that isn't realistic and where the style of the official art and the style of the graphics don't always match up super well, and so there isn't really a pressure to keep things faithful in that way. And so you should have a lot more flexibility, a lot more freedom in how you handle the cover art. Not counting any corporate or branding concerns which are probably at play here. But imagine if the game covers were more like some of the promotional art that we've seen. Something like this would work much better on the cover of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee than this. Or maybe this for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. If you're making special promotional art anyway, why not make special cover art too? Oh, and change the Western logo while you're at it. This is iconic, I'll give you that, but, you know, so is this. Thank you for watching. This is my final tier list of Pokemon cover art. You can make your own as well with the template below, and make sure to share if you do. And let me know in the comments which main series game cover is your favorite. And thank you, of course, to my patrons, especially luxury patron Ethan from Chicago. I'm Umbreon Libris. I'll see you in the next chapter. Like Lunala.